Alright, so here's the trade breakdown for today's short on NQ. Coming into the day, or actually coming into the week, I was kind of torn between whether higher time frame would go lower or higher. I was really watching the weekly fair value gap that we kept closing above consequent encroachment of. However, after further thought and comparing it with the other indices, you could see how much weaker ES actually was, which it had inverted that same fair value gap. YM has been the weaker out of all the three and is simply just going lower, whereas ES or NQ has been kind of holding up. Now, at first, like I said, I thought this was a bullish sign, but if we drop down to the daily chart, what I started to notice was the liquidity that was being pulled up down here. And if you look a little closer on this daily chart, I began to notice we're kind of setting up for a short here. So we had the SMT that was built in a few weeks ago in December. We then shifted structure here during that FOMC day. This retracement was to reprice the SIBI. We ran into this bearish breaker here, and then we showed that willingness to go lower last week or 2 weeks ago. Now, originally I thought, okay, we purged liquidity here. Now we're going to see new highs. But again, as I said, taking a closer look, price just kept retracing into a premium of this range. In this case, we've been bumping into OTE on this higher time frame, and then coming into the week on Monday, we had that big bullish run up into the daily fair value gap that repriced that fair value gap. Comparing that to ES, repricing it and closing much below it, just engaging that weekly inversion, as well as YM, which was also the weakest, running all the way up, closing below the weekly and way below the daily. So taking all that into account, moving down to the 4-hour here, the structure becomes a little clearer, and you can see that engineered sell side a little better here. After the run up here from Friday into Monday, I kind of saw this as basically just a very large Judas, get people all bulled up, people maybe dip buying, thinking we're going to make new highs, adding to the narrative that there is a lot of liquidity now under here. So Monday, I was looking as kind of like the Judas for the weekly. If I open up a weekly power of 3 here, again, Monday straight up, we ran prior week high. Again, we repriced the daily fair value gap, took out all the liquidity from this trade, trading lower last week, and then we also repriced this 4-hour pretty closely too, pretty much almost off by a tick, I think. So after seeing all that, dropping even lower now, like I said, seeing Monday as kind of the weekly Judas, very strong push higher, getting everyone bulled up, taking out all that liquidity. We pulled back into the range. Now the other indices, or you can see here on NQ, we pulled back into the range. We kept these lows intact. However, on ES, we ended up actually running below that AM, or actually that 6 AM low that kind of formed the swing low. I kind of saw that as like a structure shift on this time frame. So coming into this morning, I was expecting overnight to be some sort of retracement to then take us lower. And as you can see on YM as well, which was the weaker one, we had a much larger move lower here below that swing low, kind of shifting us after taking all that liquidity and trading into the daily. And here, if you put a fib on these levels, it actually just taps OTE right there at the 9 o'clock candle, and then you saw that move lower. So NQ has been a bit of the stronger one, and you can see we didn't get that run below, but I was using the others as a means to justify that we have shifted back to bearish after engaging this and, you know, running all that liquidity here. So now my job was to time where I think the reversal would be. Now I was looking at this as kind of, or not kind of, but I was looking at this to be a New York AM reversal structure. So overnight we kind of just went sideways, and then heading into the morning here, we right at 9:30 basically, we then wicked all that liquidity that was formed overnight. We also just tapped into that 15-minute. So I was watching this range too, because you can see here on the 15-minute, this is really the only gap. This is all balanced price. And just how we tap just the very bottom, run all the liquidity from overnight, and then we rejected lower. So if I just play this back real quick, I was watching this 15-minute fair value gap, and of course I wanted to see this get inverted for more bearish signs. So after that opening range, we wicked the highs, we came down, and then we ended up running this low here. However, we had a pretty strong close back up into this 15-minute, which had me a little bit undecided on maybe we'll see a little bit higher and then go lower, or maybe we'll re-engage the 15-minute and then go lower. However, I knew that we had 10 a.m. news, so I was trying to understand whether the 10 a.m. news was going to manipulate further, or if the 10 a.m. news would then deliver us lower. So using the other indices, again, 15-minute as well, ES I was kind of seeing this hourly on ES as like a breakaway gap, as it repriced this but failed to reach into that. YM, like I said, was reaching OT of that range, and then NQ was just tapping the very low of this, so seeing as a majority of this being a breakaway gap. And I also was watching prior day high. I didn't think we would run all the way up here, so I was really watching the liquidity from the overnight session and then these imbalances. However, once we had this close below here, if I go to a 5-minute chart, I was watching the 5 and the 15 at that time. So if I pull up these side by side, again, I was watching the 5 and the 15-minute now because I really wanted to time whether, you know, this was the manipulation. And as we were getting closer to 10, I was really trying to see if that was going to be the delivery. So after this big move lower, you see on the 5-minute we actually end up closing below this swing low. So I was kind of seeing that as a shift, bearish again, after this overnight move up. Now we had this very strong reversal here inside the opening range, so I had my eyes on this 5-minute fair value gap as well. And then I started to see how price was reacting around consequent encroachment of this 15-minute, which had been inverted on the 5, but we were still trading on this 15-minute here. So that new candle opened. I saw us wicking into this order block here, or, you know, breaker, whichever one you want to use, and I like the reaction off that. So I ended up taking, after seeing the close or that price was coming back down, I think I took a short on this candle. But after seeing the reaction to the order block, I really like that. This next candle got me a little worried, just because we really started to push up, but then as soon as we closed back down here, I was feeling a lot more confident on that trade, and that I had my stop actually set right above this high, thinking that the high of the morning was in, or high of the day in this case, and that we should now see lower prices. So at this point I was feeling pretty good, and then by 10 o'clock, once that news hit right here, you could see that it ended up actually delivering us lower. And one thing I forgot to mention, we were above the midnight and above 8:30. So that is a good sign for my checklist. Took my 2 contracts off below these equal lows here. And then from there, I had my other one set at the new week opening gap high, which actually also lines up with the weekly open. So as I mentioned, I was thinking this to be the weekly wick. So I figured that was a good spot to have a partial there. And then you also have your prior day low. I guess in hindsight, should have held a little more, but I'm happy with the amount I risked and the amount I was able to get from it. It ended up being close to like a 4R trade when it was all said and done. That runner really helped me beef it up, but like I said, got short on the order block here. Sat through a little bit of drawdown, but again, my stop was right above here, so we were good. And then we had pretty fast delivery after that.